This is how Cartoon Network described it when it came out. Oh brother, hold on to your jawbreakers because Ed, Edd and Eddy are back this November in a brand new feature-length movie. This time, Eddy has gone too far and pulled a prank that has the whole neighborhood gang after him, and only one person can save him. His legendary, never-before-seen older brother. Cartoon Network kicks off this fun Best of Ed, Edd and Eddy marathon and wraps up the night with a huge movie event. So round up your buddies for this hilarious premiere. So this was the promotion for when this movie was originally coming out. It was at the end of a huge marathon, and Cartoon Network really held Ed, Edd and Eddy highly. One of their most iconic shows of all time, and it's yet such a simple show about just kids growing up in this cul-de-sac called Peach Creek. So cul-de-sac's eerie, quiet, and the lane is completely destroyed. Ed, in a panic, rushes and immediately begins filling up one of his socks with his many belongings as he can, including his sponge collection, some buttered toast, and it's just something is clearly going on that's really intense, and we're just completely left in the dark about it. Meanwhile, at Double D's house, he's sobbing, and his belongings are all packed up as if he's never coming home, and he tries to write a letter explaining his incident to the parents, but is overcome with tears of guilt. We just keep getting more and more confused about what's going on. Like, usually an episode of Ed, Edd and Eddy is all about a scam, and this seems to be taking place after the scam, which is very intriguing. At Eddy's house, Eddy's seen packing up his personal items into a suitcase, panicking, and he hears somebody outside the back door. It feels like a horror movie at this point, but it's cinematic, so it feels good. Ed rushes in, hoisting Double D out of his sock, and they all hurry to escape. They sense the other kids coming and manage to hide in Eddy's brother's room, using the wallpaper to camouflage and disguise the door, though it's kind of poor. The dialogue is very slim up until this point. Keep forgetting that Ed, Edd and Eddy is a very storyboard-driven show. Like, the dialogue isn't as plot progressing as you would think. A lot of their content is very based on, like, Three Stooges, where it's a lot of slapstick humor, a lot of funny animations, and it's all about stretching the imagination from basic premise of just having kids growing up in a cul-de-sac. It kind of gives me a lot of Rugrats vibes. It's a bunch of kids and their imaginations gone like times 100, and it's always fun to watch, and it's just really cool. While the Eds cower in a corner, Eddy accuses their current situation of being Double D's fault. Eddy pushes Ed over to the door to listen to the other kids, using a glass to hear, but Ed startles him with a loud crunch as he begins eating the toast from his sock. Ew, this is disgusting. The noises cause the kids to discover where the Eds are hiding, and they break the door. Eddy and Double D desperately try to escape through the window and a heat vent, which are both closed off by bricks, and Ed attempts to ride away on a preserved camel in the room, which pitches him backwards into a fire alarm box marked "in case of movie break glass," which is a really funny joke.
Case of movie break glass!
Bingo! Eddy breaks open the box, but it only contains a peanut. Just then the kids manage to break open the door, enough for Ed to break open the peanut with anxiety, revealing that there's a key hidden in it. I don't know how they got that hidden in there, but okay. Eddy immediately recognizes that the key is to his brother's car. So the Eds pile in. Finally, all the kids rush in, but they are horribly maimed in one way or another. Like, Ralph's has much of his midsection bitten off. Oh my god, this is gross. Kevin is bruised and burned. Johnny's head is clenched by a bear trap. Plank is nicked and cracked, and Naz has most of her hair sheared off and is only wearing a cardboard box. Oh my god, I don't know what this prank was, but guys, this has gone way too far, clearly. Ed thrusts his feet into the car floor, but instead of driving the car, he actually smashes through the house with his feet through the bottom of the car, kind of doing it Flintstone style. The kids, meanwhile, pursue Ed in a wild chase through the cul-de-sac. Ralph nearly manages to drag Ed out of the car in this high-speed chase that isn't actually power-driven. And then the junkyard and the construction site, all the regular mainstay locations from the show. They do manage to catch the Eds, and in a brief moment, Ed and Double D pin the blame on each other, so it's clear that something's going on between them just as much as what they did. Kevin warns the dorks have not seen the last of him. So Kevin jumps on his bike with Naz following him, and they set off to go get the boys himself. I'm the most scared of Ralph in this moment, honestly. Sarah and Jimmy decide to follow as well, taking a picnic lunch just for the sake of watching the Eds get clobbered. So they don't really want to play a significant role in it. It just seems like they're all along for the ride. It kind of reminds me of some of those road trip movies where, like, you have all the characters going on their own individual adventure, and You know, so far it has that vibe because it's all the kids trying to attack the Eds, and the Eds are all trying to get away. I mean, that was like a lot of time just running through the regular mainstay of the cul-de-sac, and it's normal in a lot of feature films that the first 20 minutes is the ordinary world before we're breaking into the central plot. But it feels like the central plot was already set up, and this is just 20 minutes of us kind of living in that. Not a lot is revealed or new information in this first 20 minutes, so it does kind of feel like it drags on a little bit. Although this is when it gets a little interesting as the Eds finally leave the cul-de-sac. You know, I always feel like movies need to go beyond what the original episodic show sets up, and I like that they kind of do that immediately off the bat. Although I wish there was a little bit more dialogue-heavy scenes.
But smooth sailing!
The Eds, meanwhile, land in the desert, and their car shambles completely. They realize that they've fully escaped from the kids, but only for now. Eddy and Double D each vent their anger over the situation, and I don't know what's going on between these two. Their relationship is so strained in this so far, but I mean, that always is a good cause for conflict that keeps you watching. This is when Eddy introduces the idea of going to their brother's place, like this is the only guy that could help him, and Double D is a little doubtful, but he eventually agrees, because obviously there's not much options the boys have at this moment. Double D leaves a label on the car marked out of order, which is just, I think you're just excusing littering. Meanwhile, in the cul-de-sac, the kids are preparing to hunt for the Eds. Setting off on their own plans, Johnny and Plank actually become Captain Melonhead and Splinter the Wonderwood, which is exciting because their superhero alter egos from the show are coming into play. Johnny leaps up on his heroic escapade from roof to roof, scouring Peach Creek for the Eds, and all the kids are off to track them down. Meanwhile, Kevin is so harping on the Eds that Naz almost has issues with it, and it seems like these guys are more of a relationship than they've ever been in the actual show, like the way they kind of communicate, which I like a lot better. It seems like that's what this movie really needs, is a little bit more breathing room in terms of character development. Like, usually we don't have a lot of time to get into this huge ensemble of characters, but we do in this film. Like, we have an hour and a half, so let's buckle in. When they crash, Kevin apologizes profusely, and Naz tries to take it, but it turns out to be to the bike and not her. Ralph, after loading Wilfred with weaponry, rides off atop of the pig in pursuit for the Eds. He finds the wreck of the car in the desert, so after lunging out from behind a rock, armed with teeth and thrusting with his pitchfork, he shows Wilfred the scent so they could sniff out the Eds, and he follows on their trail, saying that he will have them by nightfall. The Eds, meanwhile, are marching through a field of cows, eagerly anticipating the arrival of Eddy's brother's plate. A little bit before, Kevin kind of insinuates that Eddy would never go to his brother because his brother would not be cool with it, almost giving us a little bit more concern for Eddy. Eddy reveals that though he's leading the way, he doesn't actually have a clue where his brother lives. The Eds think this is nuts until he pulls out a postcard for them to examine. Using a chart, Double D discovers that their past experiences with Eddy's brother's legacies, such as the stink bomb, a hot sauce recipe, and a fake treasure map, that his brother is a jokester, so of course he must be at the gag factory in the nearby town of Lemon Brook. Double D points out that Eddy's brother has to either work there or at the very least be a regular customer in the gag factory. Eddy thinks this is definitely true, so they all head over. Meanwhile, Sarah and Jimmy are skipping happily through the cul-de-sac, looking forward to their picnic lunch. But Jimmy accidentally enters the trailer park where the Kanker sisters live, and because of his bad experiences with the Kankers, Sarah runs off without him, but Jimmy musters up the courage and follows. Jimmy is trapped by the Kankers, and they start to torment him until Jimmy lets it slip that the Eds are actually in danger. Sarah comes in and challenges the Kankers, but she is no match for the three older girls, and is pinned down and tortured by a wet willy. Jimmy tells them that he knows upon seeing this and the Kankers that no harm will happen to their boyfriends, so he decides to hunt the other kids to help the Eds. So the Kanker sisters decide to go on the other kids' trail to help the Eds. Lee has a feeling that Sarah and Jimmy may know where the Eds are going, and so the Kankers hold them hostage while they travel, which is a really funny narrative. Meanwhile, the Eds are walking through the field of sunflowers, Ed and Eddy goof off, attempting to make a jerry-rig sextant to find the gag factory.
What's it called?
It's called a sextant, an astronomical instrument used to...
but they laugh at the word, and this is the closest they come to telling like a dialogue-based inappropriate joke. Eddy snickers and pretends not to hear what Eddy said. Real mature, guys. I mean, but this is what it's like to be a teenage boy, in all honesty. The Eds make it to the factory, where their attempts to break in via the back doors are unsuccessful, prompting them to try the front doors. And as they run around the front of the factory, the camera pans out to a fence of it, ominously marked with the sign that says "Keep Out." Ralph, in the meantime, has gone through the cow area and collects milk as a part of interrogation. I'm not sure how he interrogates, but this sounds perfect. Wilfred ends up following a link of sausages, which baits him into wandering off. Then at the factory, the Ed's broken into the front locked door, but the factory is deserted. It's not really in operation. Once they look at Ed's comic once again, they find out the factory has been out of business for a long time. Eddy and Ed amuse themselves with some of the leftover gags, and Double D attempts to look through the room to find any record of Eddy's brother, but all the papers have turned to dust, essentially, and heads to find Eddy and Ed, which they're being kind of disrespectful. I feel like Double D is doing all the work here, and they're almost acting like two children following their mom along on a road trip. You guys aren't acting realistic. I would be more forgiving if they were more focused on one of their own individual goals, but it just seems like they're just along for the ride, or like each character kind of takes turns being in the back seat to the plot, while one is guiding the way. When you think about the format of the actual show, you know, it's all about the scams, kind of them trying to pull it off, and I feel like most of the time is how it does or doesn't work pulling it off. Over focus on the visual gags and everything, although I am a little bored by some of it. Comical, like it just seems like a lot of hijinks, and I feel like they could at least go like super far with it. I saw this one episode where they turned Eddy into an egg and flipped him on a pan. Where's that? Found a little prank can of jelly beans with 1,000 spring-loaded snakes, and it actually bursts them out of the factory, taking Double D with them, of course, and it all showers down the countryside. Kevin and Naz are able to see this and figure out that it's the gag factory, so they immediately head toward the way. With Wilfred and Ralph only one step behind, they're now in the cow field. Still, when Wilfred revolts against Ralph, attacking in a frenzy and dropping all of Ralph's supplies before running to hide. Ed and Eddy, meanwhile, are searching for Double D, who is stuck at the top of a waterfall. I guess they all landed in different spots. Ed throws Eddy and Double D to dislodge him, but they tumble down the waterfall, both unharmed. He saves him with the trick his brother taught him, and then mentions that his brother is a whiz at harpooning whales, which Double D realizes that since Eddy's brother is a whaler, that maybe he's going to be living near the sea or somewhere near water, so the Eds actually decide to build a boat to follow the river. Meanwhile, Sarah and Jimmy come on out, and they're enslaved by the cankers, who are using them to draw their battle wagon. Jimmy and Sarah break free of the cankers thanks to a clever ploy on Sarah's part, slamming the paint can on Lee's hand. Meanwhile, Johnny and Plank are getting nowhere in their search for the Eds, but Plank decides they should start taking a bus. So despite Johnny's own reservations about getting on a bus, he ultimately is impressed by Plank's determination and declares, "Taking a bus to justice." Kevin and Naz arrive at the gag factory, and it's funny that like all the kids are just getting like an inch a bit closer, but it seems like nobody is going to get the Eds. Like, I should be more worried about the other kids, but they're not showing any threats. Like, I feel like the longer they're on screen and angry, the less effect it has. Like, at the beginning, it was really scary, and it's like, what's going on? But seeing them angry for this long throughout all these events is, like, loosening its impact, and I'm starting to slow down a little bit. Naz flirts with Kevin at the gag factory, but then she falls on a lever, and the factory actually starting up again, and the conveyor belt picks up Kevin's bike, and Naz tries to rescue it because she knows how much it means to him. Kevin manages to rescue his bike, but just as it's about to fall into a mulcher, Naz falls on top of him, knocking them both, and Kevin's bike into it. Oh my god, they're dead! No, I'm just kidding. The Eds sit on a waterfall, building their boat to freedom. To avoid disturbing the wildlife, the boat is in the shape of like a duck. I don't know why it has to look like that. It's SS Mutant, almost a chicken duck. And of course, Ed named that. Sarah and Jimmy are attempting to evade the pursuing cankers as they go through the sunflower field that the Eds were at before. Sarah and Jimmy end up finding Wilfred, and they use like a candy apple to befriend him and ride him out of the sunflowers and escaping the cankers. Meanwhile, Johnny and Plank are still on a bus. I feel like all the extra kids on their adventures toward the Eds also lowers the impact of the stakes, because it's like, it just feels like things aren't getting raised too much, and that's stressful for me. Down the river, Ed's boat ends up getting wrecked because of an unpredictable current that we just dodged watching, I guess. And he says that all he knows is that they're in a swamp in the middle of nowhere, and that his brother would not be impressed at a now ruined boat. Double D loses his cool because it's very disrespectful, and I see like a really big difference between Double D and Eddy now. Like, they're just these conjoined characters up until this point, but now we see that they have different values and morals, and it's coming out at like such a tension-driven time that I almost want to see them fight. I just need more action going on. While Eddy and Ed frolic around the swamp, Double D tries to maintain the order, and he's just giving too much to this at this point. Ed and Eddy suddenly fall into a pool of quicksand and begin sinking. When Double D tries to save them but fails, and then in a really depressing moment, Double D blames himself for their deaths, crying out in utter anguish. And we have a really dark moment where like we actually believe this could have possibly happened. Like, this is the last episode. Like, this is a really dramatic scene. Like, there's a chance this could have I mean, it's a kid's show. We know it wouldn't have. But still, like, the idea that it could have happened is really exciting. Or maybe the movie is just not building up momentum enough that I'm inventing stakes. Ed and Eddy reveal that it was all a joke, and they were only an ankle deep, and Double D is completely violated. He storms off, and him and Eddy go off at each other in the road. Essentially, like, their relationship has gone so bad since this. Like, they've been blaming each other all this time, and now it's kind of headed to a peak. Double D says that Eddy's desire to scam them is what brought them into the big trouble in the first place. Finally, we see like the resentment of all Double D has been doing for the boys boil up, and Eddy attacks back that he wasn't completely innocent either, and that he built the machine in the first place. And it's essentially kind of like taking away from the importance of all their inventions and scams and actually focusing on the characters. And that's a really active choice in this movie, which I really appreciate. Even if the slice of life plot doesn't necessarily translate to a feature film in a super simple way, it's nice to know that stakes are being raised, characters are being developed, and this is still going somewhere. We learn a little bit more about whatever that prank was earlier that we kind of forgot about, and they mentioned that like it's Eddy's fault because he pressed the red button, and I don't know if it was like a machine or like what even happened. Double D decides that he is heading home, to which Ed tries to stop, but like clearly like they're broken up at this point. Like, they're not friends anymore. Eddy is devastated and enraged, saying that he doesn't want to see Double D again, and it was all his fault, but he sinks into tears as we see him like completely break down. Eddy then, unlike something he's ever done before, admits that he is the one responsible for the failed scam that brought them here, calling himself a foul-up wannabe loser, and Double D is touched by Eddy's change of heart when he sees him cry, and they decide to make up and continue onward toward Eddy's brother's house. See, this moment, if this was built up a lot more, if this was like reminded a lot more, I think it would have been a lot more impactful. I definitely think this is the most memorable scene in the entire movie, and I remember this even when I was growing up at the time. Like, this was the part that it really takes it away, but looking back, it doesn't have the same impact I thought it did, because it's not building up. It just kind of explodes. They cry, they have an argument, like it doesn't feel like it's realistic like deterioration of a friendship. It feels like a single fight that happens for 2 minutes, and then it's kind of resolved. But the movie's not over yet, so why would we start talking about resolving it, The Eds continue on their long way, exhausted from the walk, and they end up with a group of fireflies. They call it quits at like this small abandoned park when everybody starts to settle in, including Double D, who labels everything in the vicinity. And the next morning, Kevin walks upwards on his bike, trying to comprehend what happened to Naz, like wondering if she was getting back to him for something that Kevin had no knowledge of. But spots of silhouette of someone appears to be Eddy, so Kevin runs off trying to focus on Eddy, and it's kind of like this deep metaphor for Kevin keeps chasing things that he has no control over. Like, he is going off in all these directions and at the fault of this person he really cares about, Naz. Like, he puts his bike before Naz, it's clear that he needs a little bit more character growth in order to get the Eds. The Eds go racing off for food, Ed and Double D following, and they run off a cliff. But they're saved by a Ferris wheel, and Ed's fear of heights overcomes him. He tries to escape, but the Ferris wheel launches the Eds directly to the amusement park sign. Double D notices that the sign they hit is Mondo a Go-Go, a image on the postcard that Eddy sent about his brother, which means that he actually lives at this park. Oh, thank God, this is finally wrapping up. Eddy's brother lives in that trailer nearby, and then Sarah, Jimmy, while still riding Wilfred, also seem to be heading towards the park. It seems like everything's about to come to a climax. Just as Eddy is about to knock on the door, the Cankers arrive too. They captured Ralph, Kevin, Naz, and all have them tied up. Wilfred, Jimmy, and Sarah come up, and the Eds are alive and well. Everybody is here at this park, but right as the moment they're about to get him, Eddy is at his brother's door. He opens it, his brother comes out, and instead of protecting him like everybody thought and everybody had hoped, that his brother ended up being this really cool. You meet Eddy's brother, and he makes jokes about the kids, calling out Double D as Eddy's girlfriend, and all the expectations of his brother is just completely tarnished. He's disrespectful, he's brutally mistreating his brother, and he even twists his leg around, and this guy's just such a jerk. He's such an older brother that doesn't care clearly about his younger brother, and all the kids seem to value Eddy in a different light, which is essentially what the show's about. It's just a scammer that's like trying so hard to connect with these kids, but he doesn't know how to, because clearly he has an older brother that's always been a bully. And then suddenly the entire show means a little bit more, because it kind of makes sense. It adds up. It's who Eddy is. Eddy is the only one who says he's not a big bad guy deep down, and that all he really wanted was friendship and recognition, something that his older brother never gave him. And oh my god, this is so emotionally sad. Suddenly all the kids come together and actually turn against Eddy's brother, and this is such a beautiful moment. Like, all of them standing up for him at adversity. Like, they've always hated Eddy. They were willing to like murder him at this point. I mean, I don't know if that's like a good thing or not, but in this moment, like, they're truly standing up for him, and it just shows about the unity that Ed and Eddy tries to create. Eddy finally admits that he made up everything he's ever said about his brother, and everybody somehow gets it. Everybody's moved by Eddy's apologies, and the kids and everybody get along one last time and celebrate. Even the Kanker sisters muse over Eddy's brother. Oh my god, my favorite joke is when Double D...
It only took 130 episodes, 4 specials, and a movie, Eddy.
Let's sing a song!
And everybody sings off into the end, and the TV screen says the end, and this is the absolute, like, I definitely think on paper this is the perfect movie. Like, if I saw the script, I'd be like, this is amazing. I just feel like the pacing and how it was carried out with the individual character goals was just so anticlimactic. I feel like the pacing of the Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy movie kind of did it a little bit better. But Ed and Eddy did have a lot more emotional payoff, and even though it's slice of life, it did translate to the film in an impressive way. I think it would have been not necessary to be shown in theaters, but it's definitely an amazing send-off, let alone finale of a television show. It's almost like an amazing finale, but kind of a anticlimactic movie, if that makes sense. All around, like, I really enjoyed revisiting this. It definitely feels like the perfect cap on one of my favorite kids shows. I just wish it was as memorable as the show itself, and I feel like other movies have been able to do that successfully. And this, but I don't know, what do you guys think? Do you like Ed and Eddy, and how did you feel when the movie came out? Be sure to comment below and stick around, because Johnny 2000, I'm coming out with an Ed and Eddy video again soon. So I would love to know what you guys thought about this. Okay guys, have a great nostalgic day.